Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Joy, and if this is your first time here, I am a fifth-year medical student in Cuba. My last video was a mini vlog of me describing my day in my life or showing you guys what a day in my life as a medical student is. And at the end of the video, I answered a few questions that I frequently get asked about studying medicine in Cuba, how long it takes, what do you have to do. But what I did not anticipate was that so many of you guys had more questions, specific questions about studying in Cuba. So what I decided to do is to make this video to answer some of the questions I was asked on previous platforms like Instagram, the YouTube comments, emails, just to answer your questions. I know many of you may have the same questions. So today we're going to answer some of your specific questions when it comes to studying in Cuba, or in particular studying medicine in Cuba. So if you see me looking down, I have my little notepad right here. So let's get right into the video. Okay, so the first question I'm going to answer today is, what is the name of my university? Okay, so as a foreign student on scholarship, I came to a school called Elam, Escuela Latinoamericana de Medicina. It's translated to Latin American School of Medicine. So usually the students who come on my scholarship program, which is Proyecto Elam or Elam Project, come to Elam. And Elam is a school that was designed for international students of different socioeconomic backgrounds to study medicine in Cuba and to serve their communities after they graduate. So like I said in my past video, you study 3 years at Elam at the campus, and then after the 3 years, you do your clinical rotations at another faculty, whether it be in the same province, which is Havana, or in another province. Now, question number 2 is the million-dollar question. How do I apply? So many people ask me this question on the different platforms, and I made a playlist on my channel with certain people who do study in Cuba, who did apply directly through Cuba, who explained with details how they got to study in Cuba. For me, I am on a government scholarship. What does that mean? That means my government announced scholarships, like they do every year. They announced scholarship to study in Cuba, and that particular year they were offering medicine and dentistry. So I applied to my government, and my government went, or they had a selection process where they selected a few of us and they sent us to Cuba. So that's how I applied to study in Cuba. But there are many different countries who have many different processes, and some people are on scholarship and some people are paying to study in Cuba. If you want to pay to study in Cuba, I have added some videos in those playlists. It's called Cuba or Medical School. I will link it, and you guys can see exactly how those people went about applying to study in Cuba and paying for that as well, the cost and everything. The next question is, can we have some info on getting scholarship for CARICOM students? So like I said, I applied to my government, and for most of the Caribbean governments, I believe is the same. So I believe that there is a process where the government publicizes the scholarships available for the next academic year on their website, like my country publicized on their website, and you see the requirements for application, you apply to the government, and maybe you, like me, you had to go, or you will have to go through a selection process, an interview process, and the candidates they think that are best suited for the scholarship will get the scholarship. I believe that is the same process for other CARICOM students. I have many other friends from CARICOM countries in Cuba, and from what they've told me, this is the same process that they had to go through. The next question is there a requirement to practice in Cuba after you earn a degree there? From what I know, you are not required to practice medicine in Cuba after you earn a degree. Those people who do go on to further their studies in Cuba are those who decide to do a specialty or a residency in Cuba. So that would be furthering your studies, but there is no requirement to practice medicine in Cuba after you graduate. From other people I know, or my schoolmates and everyone around me, they graduate after the 7 years and they go to their country, and their country either provides space for them to do an internship there or an opportunity for them to start working in their country. So there is no requirement for you to practice in Cuba after graduating. As a matter of fact, as international students, our residency, our Cuban residency expires when we are supposed to graduate. So unless you extend that, you like if you go to the necessary process to extend your Cuban residency, you actually cannot stay in Cuba longer than you are supposed to. So there is no requirement to practice in Cuba. Someone asked, am I going to be taught in English or Spanish? Um, Unfortunately, guys, you have to learn Spanish to study medicine in Cuba. I know there are many other countries that offer scholarships that teach in people's native languages like English, but in Cuba, everything is taught in Spanish. As far as I know, for medicine, you are taught in Spanish. So like I said in the last video, you do well, I said 6 months, but really and truly it's about 4 months. 4 months of an intense Spanish course. Now, the thing is, I know a lot of people are scared that, oh, I can't learn a new language and study in a new language. Let me tell you, thousands, almost 30,000 people have graduated as medical doctors in Cuba who studied in Spanish, who don't originally speak Spanish, and they graduate and they practice and they are good doctors. So, what I would say is be open to it, be open to learning a new language. When you immerse yourself in the culture, when you are taught in Spanish, it comes quite easy. Well, it's easier for other people and it's more difficult for some people. It depends on your native language. I realize that French and Portuguese speakers learn Spanish faster than, let's say, English speakers. I also realize that people from Africa learn Spanish faster than people from the Caribbean. It's about your mindset and whether you really want to be good at the language or not. I would recommend that if you do want to study medicine or anything in Cuba, to start learning a little bit of Spanish right now before you come to Cuba. If you have gotten a scholarship or if you're applying, learn some Spanish, because although some people do come without knowing any Spanish and they are taught and they are good at it, I mean, you do want to have a head start and you don't want to struggle. So learn the basic things, learn greetings, learn how to order food, learn basic things so that it won't be so difficult for you. The next thing I would say is that you should practice. A lot of people, they don't like to speak Spanish. Many students here in Cuba don't like to speak Spanish unless they have to. And as soon as they go to meet their friends who speak English, they just speak English all day long. I would say try to make friends with people you have to speak Spanish to. Try to immerse yourself in environments where you have to speak Spanish. Make Cuban friends or make friends with people who don't speak the same language as you so that you are forced to speak Spanish to them. Now, this question came in the form of an email, and this young lady asked me, or she explained to me that she teaches English online to non-English speakers, and she wanted to know that if she came to study in Cuba, if she would be able to continue to work online. Now, the internet situation in Cuba is quite a complicated one. As many of you may know, Cuba is a communist country, and because of that, they do have many restrictions when it comes to the internet. Sometimes the internet might not be reliable at all, and sometimes on other days it might be better. I would not say absolutely not that you can't do anything online or it can't or running a business online is unsustainable in Cuba. I will say that it will be very difficult. That's the honest answer. It's going to be very difficult because the internet, first of all, most places in Cuba will not have Wi-Fi. For example, I came from a country where most people have Wi-Fi at home. If you go to any institution, a supermarket, a bank, anywhere, there'll be Wi-Fi in those areas. And I came to Cuba. Well, when I first came to Cuba, there was no internet period, unless you went to a Wi-Fi park or something. About 6 months later, after I came to Cuba, mobile data was introduced and it has been improving. It was expensive at first. The cost has leveled a bit, but it's still quite costly. But then it can be unreliable. It may drop, it may work well at certain times. Late at night, it works very well. During the day, it doesn't work well. So it's a complicated situation. And if someone is willing to try and someone is willing to be patient, then I think they can make it work. I got many questions when it came to being able to practice in the US and the US board exams. How does it compare to the US? To be honest, guys, I cannot give definitive answers when it comes to comparing the US medical system to the Cuban medical system. It's such a broad topic, and I think someone who has more expertise in that area or an American who's studying here in Cuba can answer that question properly. However, the question is, what is the pass rate on national boards to get US license? So I did have to do some research for that. And according to a website called cubaheal.com, US residents who studied medicine in Cuba achieved a match rate of 94%. Um, I believe that if you search online, you will get reliable sources as to what the pass rates for board exams are for US IMGs who studied in Cuba. But for now, that's the information I was able to get. Next question is, can I study hotel management in Cuba? I have not heard of anyone who has studied hotel management in Cuba. Um, I spend most of my time around medical students. I know I have some friends who've studied architecture, nursing. I have family members who studied accounts and business, but I have never heard of someone who studied hotel management. However, I will put on screen a list of specialties or a list of degrees or majors that you can study in Cuba from what I found online. But as of now, I haven't heard of anyone who studied hotel management in Cuba. This question was also another specific case of a young man who explained that he is studying medicine at a US Caribbean Medical University, and he's going into his last 2 years, which are his clinical rotations, and it has become financially difficult. And he wanted to know if it were possible to switch from his school to a Cuban medical school and finish his clinical rotations in Cuba. Unfortunately, I think that may be very difficult, if not impossible, because, like I said, firstly, we study medicine in Spanish in Cuba. Secondly, the Cuban education system is vastly different from most other systems. It's different from my system growing up, what I knew as education system in St. Lucia. I grew up in the Caribbean, and I believe that if this person goes to a US Caribbean medical school, then it would be a huge jump. I think that if that person or if anyone wants to transfer from one medical school to another medical school, they will most likely have to start from the beginning because all the content and everything we learn is based on the Cuban medical system. Although it is tailored for us students who are going to work in our countries, it's mostly based on the Cuban medical system and it is taught in Spanish. So it will be a big jump. Okay, so this question is about the cost of living. The person asked, what is the cost of living near Elam? I don't live near Elam anymore. I do live in the same province, Havana. But the cost of living in Cuba is another complicated story. I know many things in Cuba are complicated because Cuba is a little complicated island in the Caribbean. But because of the economic crisis going on in Cuba right now, there's a lot of inflation. So if I speak on the cost of living right now, in a month, it might be totally different. Um, there's so much going on when it comes to inflation, exchange rate, the cost of food going up, the cost of rent going up, everything is going up. So the cost of living in Cuba fluctuates. It was cheaper when I first came to Cuba. Now it is almost triple. The pandemic, the world political situation, everything affects what's going on in Cuba, as well as the restrictions that they have, the sanctions and everything. So it's a big, complicated story. The cost of living in Cuba fluctuates from day to day, week to week, month to month. I got this question in my YouTube comments. I actually can't find the comment right now, but I remember someone did ask me, or someone did say that they're over 40 years old and they wanted to know if they can still apply. Guys, it's not too late to accomplish your dreams. We have classmates that are over 50 and they are studying medicine in Cuba. We had two Colombian classmates who are over 50, married with children, studying medicine in Cuba on scholarship. So I believe that if you're eligible, if you go through the right means to apply, then you will get the opportunity to study medicine in Cuba. So we're down to the last two questions. And the one before the last question is, would it be possible to rent my own apartment in Cuba? And what would the cost be? Yes, it is possible to rent your own apartment in Cuba, and the cost depends on the province that you live in. Like I said, the cost of living is going up frequently, well, every day in Cuba. So the cost will vary based on what the economic situation is like in the current moment. But It is possible to rent your own apartment. It depends on the type of program you are in, though, whether you'll be allowed to rent or not, whether you are paying or whether you're on scholarship, the area that you live in. Some schools are stricter than others when it comes to renting outside of the campus. But in general, it is possible to rent your own apartment in Cuba. I would suggest speaking to people, various people who rent in different parts of Cuba, and finding out how much their rent costs, because in Havana, where I live, it is probably about double to rent an apartment than it would cost in a province that's more like countryside, or, you know, where it's not very city like and everything like that. The last question, I think I saved the best for last. I mean, I'm biased because I love talking about my faith. But this person asked, what is it like being a Christian in Cuba? So one of my first concerns when I got the scholarship to study in Cuba is, would I find a church that I like? Would I be able to, continue growing in my faith and all that in a completely different country, with a completely different culture? Would I make Christian friends? And I would say for the most part, it has been a very good experience. I have a wonderful church right now. Um, Wonderful church activities, always active, a very active youth group. I feel like I've grown a lot. I think when it comes to Christianity in Cuba, Cubans are very passionate, very, very passionate about their faith. And I think it has a lot to do with them being content with what they have. In Cuba, most of the population is either atheist or something else. So when people are Christians, they truly are Christians. And what I love about Cuba when it comes to Christianity is the passion, the drive, the dedication and everything. It's very warm, it's very family like. They take care of each other. They have a high standard of church, from my experience. There are also many student groups, Christian groups, depending on your denomination and all of that. So it's very easy to get involved if you would like to. There are also other religious groups if you're not a Christian. There are many Muslims in Cuba. I would say, there's something for everybody when it comes to faith. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it's not too long. I tried to answer as many questions as I can. Some questions were very repetitive, but I tried to touch the major questions that were asked continuously. So thank you so much for watching my video. Have an amazing day and keep shining.